Diary of a Sociopathic Mother-in-Law Next Door entry. Today's date is Monday, 23rd of June, 2025. In the last entry, we covered the secret funeral and the conversation, first part of the conversation that I had with the husk, trying to point out her ill behaviour, got nowhere. Second part of that conversation, started talking more about her past, why she thinks the way she does, and the fact that I don't believe that she actually trusts anybody, and that's where a lot of this comes from. And just as we had finished talking about the secret funeral and how her family treated her, and the conversation I thought had come to a conclusion, she stopped us to what seemed like have a desperation to tell me something. And she broached that subject in the most bizarre way. When you remember about the abortion, you won't like us then. What? You haven't told us about it? What are you talking? So straight away you can see that the husk doesn't think is normal the right word? What is normal? But it's just a weird choice of phrase. I'm going to churn that over in my mind for so long, try and work out what that was. Probably just a total lack of self-esteem. Doesn't know how to broach anything. The look of awkwardness on her face. She's not used to talking about actual emotional stuff, deep stuff, real stuff. Doesn't know how to broach these subjects. I think that's probably all it is. Total lack of self-esteem. So anyway, the abortion. So obviously I had to ask a lot of questions. You can't just tell you a coherent story. You have to ask questions, get the relevant information to piece together what happened. She can't tell you a coherent chronological story. She just misses bits out and overemphasizes things which aren't necessarily that important. And this is because she's got no empathy. So she can't put herself in the listener's shoes and have that, awareness of how a story is coming across and piece it together in a way that it would make sense. Just random stuff comes out. And anyway, so after asking lots and lots of questions, she was 37-year-old, thereabouts. So this was, funnily enough, 37 years ago. It's funny how the numbers work like that, where pivotal thing happens, some sort of midpoint, relevant, and then it comes back and becomes a bigger thing. So at the age of 37, don't know what exact age, she couldn't tell the exact time. I'm sure she sat and thought about it, she probably could. Because surely you don't forget how old your unborn baby would be. Anyway, so 37 years ago, she had another significant event. 37 years later, she's now for the first time, getting it off her chest, and telling me why she's telling me. It's just, again, the weird dysfunction of this family. Nobody talks. And nobody knows important stuff about each other. And along comes me. And somehow I'm the one who can tap into this. It's really frustrating. So, 37 years ago, she was 37. And so this is her story. She fell pregnant to stepdad, unplanned. And Beacon would have been 11 going on 12, there or thereabouts. 11. And Roadkill would have been, whatever, 8. So, her story is that she fell pregnant, unplanned, and stepdad wouldn't even talk about it. He wouldn't even consider having the baby. It was just a, no, get rid, or I'm gone. Thank you. Ultimatum type thing. And absolute ultimatum with no conversation, no consideration whatsoever, no weighing up the pros and cons of each. And bear in mind that stepdad is around 7 years older, so he would have been 44. Not the sort of age most people think about having another baby. So anyway, ultimatum, no conversation, and she was faced. She in her mind, she wanted it, in her story, and she told me she doesn't believe in abortion. So she wanted the baby. Again, this is her story. But she was faced, yet again in her life, she was faced with a huge decision, with huge consequences in either way. Whichever decision you make, huge consequences. So she was faced with the decision of, again, her husband walking out on her, and again, being left as a single mother, bringing up not only 2 young girls who are nowhere near, the job is nowhere near finished. Teens are approaching. Vital. I mean, it's all vital, all of your development, but the teens in particular. And then she's going to have to be a single mum again with 2 young girls and a baby. How the hell is she going to cope with that? Was obviously her thoughts. And obviously we know our character now. The husk doesn't make decisions based on whether they're right or wrong. And she doesn't make decisions based on what she believes is right for her. What she does is she makes decisions based on what other people want and what other people think. And that can be a quality in some cases, trivial things like, I'm willing to go to that restaurant to keep that member of the group happy. At the end of the day, it's not my first choice, but I don't mind that type of food. It's a fairly trivial example of when you can put yourself second, but these are life-changing events. These are significant. These affect not only you, not only your husband, not only your children, but this new life that you've conceived. Take responsibility. Do what's right. And by that, I'm not telling her what she should have done. I'm telling her to do what's right. Not do what somebody else is putting you, coercing you into. So she had determination. And again, her story, her words. She had no emotional support. Does this sound familiar? She had no emotional support from her family. A, because her husband wasn't interested. And B, she hadn't told anyone. So how can she get emotional support? Apparently, the only person she did tell was stepdad's sister. Stepdad's sister is the person who she raised the glass to. If you go back to his 80th birthday celebration, it was stepdad's sister that she raised the glass to when she couldn't say her own husband's name. And then all of a sudden things are clicking into place. Resentment towards her husband. So she got no emotional support. She had to go to hospital by herself. And then he was in the pub, apparently. And I think it was the day after. Please forgive me if I'm not understanding the workings of the female body. And I get some of this wrong, but I think it was the day after there was bleeding. And obviously that had to be dealt with as well. That would have been really difficult. So nobody's denying this is a traumatic event. Absolutely, it's a traumatic event. Especially if you didn't want to do it. Now, stepdad is never been known for his having an emotional side. And nobody says he was perfect. I've never said, and I've never thought he was perfect. I knew exactly what his flaws were. Doesn't mean I didn't love him. I didn't rely on him for emotional support. I relied on him for just being a constant in my life, and the metaphoric arm around you, pat on the back. That's my relationship and nobody's going to change that. But does this surprise us? No. Is it 100% true? Who knows? So she went through this, and then afterwards, every year, and this is why she must be able to remember the exact time, if she actually sat down and worked it out. Every year, on what would have been, she said to me, on what would have been his birthday, because she had it in her head that it was a boy. Every year on what would have been his birthday. Don't know. Maybe is she talking about the date of the termination? Or is she talking about the due date? I'm pretty sure she would have had a rough due date. So is that etched in her mind, and every year she thinks he would have been such and such an age. So every year it's really windy, I'm just gonna pause till the wind dies down. Right. Hopefully that's a bit better. So, every year on whatever she perceives to be his birthday, this unborn baby, she mentions it to stepdad and says, oh well, he would have been such and such age today. You know, she's just trying to remember and have a thought for the little human that she terminated. She's just trying to have a thought, a memory, and a moment. And apparently, stepdad just grunts okay. She doesn't get any response. She doesn't get any emotional support, which obviously must be difficult. But you chose to marry him. You chose to stick with him. You chose him over your baby. You made those choices. And now you are living the life which is manifested as a result of all of your choices. And these choices, the resentment towards a husband, I believe, not should be, but is resentment towards a self. Because deep down, you can't blame anybody else for your choices. So, but she told me this, and things started to click into place around the resentment. No, the moment she decided to marry stepdad, all of the people in the community, I mean, remember, he's 7 years older. It's a bit of a age difference, and I've just put it this way: the make an odd couple in terms of looks. That's all I'm going to say. So, everybody in the community, he's 7 or 8 years older, and he had a bit of a reputation, maybe slightly a reputation of a bit of a womanizer to a degree, but also he was a bit of a fighter back in the day. These are going back to the sort of 70s and 80s. If men had a disagreement, it was dealt with and settled physically. That's just how it was a lot of the time back in those days. So he was a bit of a worky ticket, bit of a woman's man. Is that the right phrase? I don't even know what the right phrase is, but I think you know what I'm getting at. So everybody in the community said it'll never last. And the husk has even said she was determined to prove everybody wrong. That's stubbornness. That's not love. That's stubbornness and ego. And imagine the resentment that builds up and builds up and builds up over time, because you're only married to, living with somebody, putting up with them, dealing with life with this partner that you do not love. You are proving everybody wrong. And that's the husk in a nutshell. Or a husk, just in a husk shell. That is her in a nutshell. Stubborn and will martyr herself. This is where the martyr comes in. She will martyr herself just to prove people wrong. Just so she can have some sort of pride. But not pride as in, I'm proud of my children. Pride as in ego. I was right. I showed them. Oh, brilliant. You showed them. All right, didn't you, Husky? You showed them. Look at the state of you. Look at the resentment. Look at the fact you can't even raise a glass to your husband in front of everybody. You can't even give him respect now that he's passed on. And what has her life inside her head been like? Carrying this resentment? It's not his fault that she chose to stand by him. And, when it was against her best interests, it's not his fault. Let me just pause while I do this. So that resentment is from day one. When I first met the Beacon 33 years ago, they didn't even sit in the same room. The Husk and stepdad. He had the big main living room. It's like a big old townhouse. He had the big old main living room. Huge. And they had this little snug room. The Husk and the two girls used to sit in there watching the television, crammed in a little room. That's how they lived. They didn't even spend time in the same room. And as I was saying, so it was clear to me that it was dysfunctional. Even though I was only 16 when I met the Beacon. But clearly I was like, I didn't sort of probe too much. But as a 16-year-old, you can recognise when something's not quite right. So anyway, it's not his fault. I'm not saying that he's a good person. I'm saying that you made those choices. The resentment is not towards him. She may consciously think that, but subconsciously it can't be. It has to be towards herself. She chose to introduce him to the girls as stepdad. And Beacon developed, it wasn't plain sailing. Of course it wasn't, but it was real. And that's the Beacon's words, it was real. And then in adult life, the Beacon and stepdad, their relationship blossomed. And he also interacted fantastically, amazingly with my daughter. He absolutely adored her. And she absolutely adored him. He had all the time in the world for her. They used to play silly games, like wrestling games and jumping on each other. She was always using him like a climbing frame and hugging him, and he absolutely loved seeing her grow up. So don't tell me that he hasn't got any emotional side to him. So, but the husk, you chose to bring him into the family home and introduce him as the father figure. So don't complain when at least one of your daughters develops a father-daughter relationship. And don't resent that as well, because she does. So anyway, back on track. It's not his fault. How can it be? And for the record, he did respect her. He might have made in people's eyes the wrong decisions. He might not have been husband of the year, but he did respect her, and he did think very highly of her. I don't even know if some of these older generations know what love is. So many of the older generation seem to have bitterness and some of these qualities. But anyway, he did respect her, and he did think very highly of her, and he thought very, very highly of the two girls and how they grew and became adults and all the rest of it. So anyway, you made those choices, Husk. You live with the consequences. Any resentment is towards yourself, even if it's not conscious, subconsciously, deep down, you know that you have made your life what it is. This is your life. You made it. Don't play victim, and don't blame anybody else. So, when she told me all of this, obviously I wasn't thinking as clearly as what I am now, because this was a bombshell. And I listened, asked questions, and, showed empathy and sympathy. And I was honest with her. I said, well, if you don't believe in terminating babies, then yeah, you did do the wrong thing. But you have to look yourself in the mirror, and you have to deal with that, go through whatever you need to go through, and deal with the shame and the guilt of doing something that you believed was wrong. Deal with it, and then come out with the other side, and don't carry the guilt and the shame. You were in a difficult place, and you didn't deal with it the way that you would have wanted to, but you did that. You did that, and if you don't deal with the guilt and the shame, and look at yourself in the mirror and go through whatever emotion you've got to go through, if you don't do that, you carry that trauma and you bury it deep into your psyche, and you never grieve. It gets bottled up, and so here we are again, another baby to grieve that she hasn't actually grieved. She hasn't gone through the process. She hasn't dealt with the trauma. She hasn't dealt with the guilt and the shame. Guilt and the shame, and the first one being, she would have felt guilty even if it wasn't her fault. And, you know, the guilt and the shame of not going to the funeral, not being able to do the funeral, not being done in secret, and not being able to talk about it and have emotional support, just turn into I must be a horrible, horrible person, because you're being treated like dirt, like absolute dog dirt. So the message you're receiving, the psyche, the inner self is receiving a message of, I must be horrible, I must be a horrible, horrible person. And then you start to have self-loathing. So she's never dealt with the guilt and the shame of this traumatic event. Lost my train of thought. So again, she's married a man and sticking by him through stubbornness. She's making decisions based on what other people want, important, vital decisions, putting her own beliefs and morals to one side and doing what somebody else wants just to keep their loyalty. What does that say? Even herself, you know, to her inner self, what's the message? God, you must really hate yourself if you just put all of your beliefs, your morals, and what you actually want, if you just bin that for another person who you've got no respect for, you must really, really hate me. That's what the inner self is saying to itself. You must really hate me, husk. More and more self-loathing and the deterioration of self-respect. So lives in this dysfunctional household, and she's willing to do that just to keep somebody else happy. But it's not really to keep them happy, is it? All he was going to do was leave the household. When I say all, I don't mean to belittle the impact of that. I mean, all he was going to do was leave you. So it wasn't to make him happy. It was just to keep him. Why would you want to keep someone who you've got no actual love for, and who you're only with out of stubbornness? Why would you want to keep them? It's just status. Just status. So I think I've covered this. Did she even love the Beacon's natural dad, Knob father? Did she even love him back in the day? Or was that status? Because he had a lot of status. Best house, good job, company car, all that sort of stuff, you know, back in the 70s. This would have been, you know, well above working class. So, and he's gone on to maintain that level of resource. So a lot of status in terms of keeping up with the Joneses or beating the Joneses. Now when she got with stepdad, he also had a fair amount of status. So I've always seen the pattern here. So stepdad had a big 4-bedroom detached house on a corner plot of like a cul-de-sac on a modern housing estate this would have been the plot to have, a corner plot, big wraparound garden, 4 bedrooms detached, and he lives by himself, as in he's got all of this on his own income. He also might have owned another property, a flat somewhere or something. Anyway, the point is status, and the Beacon can remember this house. It was lovely, had its own vegetable plot, vegetable patch, and all the rest of it. Now, that status soon disappeared, unfortunately, because stepdad, let's just say, the tax man caught up with him, because he was self-employed, and obviously mustn't have been paying attention properly, let's just say. I don't, I've got no evidence of any deliberate behaviour in relation to this. He was never very good with money, to be honest. So, even till his last days, he wasn't very good at budgeting and figures, maths, I suppose. Anyway, so the taxman caught up with them, and they ended up having to downsize. So pretty much, fairly early on, there was a blow to the status, and he died with pretty much nothing. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, so blow to the ego there for the husk. She's now with someone. And I'm going to jump to this conclusion. This is my conclusion. She's with someone that she doesn't love. She's only with out of status. She's latched on to somebody. She probably thinks the age gap is going to kind of keep him, if that makes sense. A younger woman with an older man. Probably you see this a lot, don't you? When a rich old man with a very young, attractive wife, and you jump to the same conclusion, don't you? I'm not saying she was very young and very attractive. What I'm saying was that an element of that dynamic is there. He's got status, and she thinks that he's going to stick around because you've got a younger model on his arm. That's what I believe. I don't believe it was love, and she resents him because she knows she's only there out of these materialistic reasons. He's not a perfect husband in her eyes. Again, your choice. And she resents him, but she resents herself, remember. It just gets targeted towards him. And then she's only sticking with him out of stubbornness. This abortion thing happened, and it could have only been, if the Beacon was 11, it must have been early on, fairly early on in their relationship. So, is it to trap him? So he can't leave? Has our plan completely backfired? Because this goes on, doesn't it? Where women are with a man just as a resource, and then they'll quite happily have have children, bring children into it just to secure the relationship. Because what man wants to leave his children ultimately? I'm pretty sure no man actually wants to do that. So anyway, you can see where the resentment comes from now. This abortion thing, you know, is that a plan that's backfired? And then you've already got no self-respect if you're willing to do that, i.e., bring a little human into this world just for your own benefit, just for your own status and you know, financial gains. You're already a selfish human being if you're willing to do that, and then it backfires again, just like it did with the Knobfather, the first husband, when he was walking out and she begged him. He can even have his mistress as long as he looked like he was still in the household for the Joneses and for the resource, so she could live in the house and enjoy the trappings. This is her character, and she's done it again. You don't get pregnant by accident. I'm pretty sure she knew, you know, how the birds and the bees operate. So, I mean, you could get by accident, as in if you're taking what you believed is something that's going to protect you from that. So yeah, maybe I was a bit harsh saying that. I don't know the circumstances, but anyway. But if I had to form an opinion based on the character, I would say that it was planned. She planned to do that to secure the resource, the relationship. This is what she's willing to do. And just like the first husband, it's backfired. It's completely backfired, and he just went up yours. And if that's true, if I'm correct, then she deserves what she gets. But if you're willing to do that, you're already a selfish person. And then when it backfires, in order to keep the resource, you just terminate the human. The baby, oh well, that backfired, I'll get rid of it, didn't work. And this is what I believe, because I know her. She's completely selfish. She treats her own daughter like trash. Why she's going to be any different in any of these other scenarios? It's a fact. She terminated the baby to keep him. There's somebody who's willing to walk out on you for that. They're willing to walk out on you for that. That should be sending you a message anyway. So, you know, I don't blame him. I'm not saying it was a nice thing to do. Not at all. But I don't blame him for her decision. Still her decision. You're getting yourself into that situation. Deal with it. So anyway, going back to when she actually told me the story, you know, I wasn't thinking like this, because this was a huge bombshell. So obviously I showed empathy and sympathy, and after the conversation I felt like she had opened up to us, because I had tapped into some of these past events and how they affect our thinking, how they means she has a lack of trust. Well, clearly, how can she trust everybody? Everybody has treated her like dirt. including herself. Of course she doesn't trust anybody. How can she? These are the nearest and dearest in her life. Of course, she's completely trustless. She doesn't even trust herself. All self-respect is gone. And that's left a husk of a human. A protection mechanism to protect from any further harms. Trust nobody. Look strong. Stiff upper lip. No emotions. It's a protection mechanism. So when she first told us this, I thought I was, tapping into something, and that I might be helping her deal with some of these things, and it might actually have some improvements if somebody shows her a bit of TLC, and you can trust us. Obviously, it's a two-way street. I have to be able to trust you, but you can trust us if that trust is, mutual. So I thought I was building something. I thought I tapped into something, and I thought maybe getting these things out in the open might have a slight improvement on our behaviours in the future. But obviously, as you can probably gather, that didn't happen. But at the time, I went home, I went back to the house and told the beacon this story about the abortion. And then when the husk came back in later that night, the beacon went over and sort of, she gave her a big hug and said how sorry she was that she had to go through that. And the initial feelings that the beacon and myself felt towards stepdad was a bit of resentment, and we it kind of made us just want to not honour his memory as much in front of her. So respect that she had due cause to be resentful towards him, and we would just be sensitive towards that. Doesn't change our relationship with him, but we'll be a bit more sensitive. And also during the conversation with the husk, I even asked her. I was pretty straight, as in I didn't beat round the bush. I even asked her things like, is that why he showed so much resentment towards him? Yes. She was so quick to say yes and just admit that she resented him. At no point did she go gently or lightly on him. And remember, he's not here to defend himself. But at no point did she go lightly on him, and she was, straight off the bat, yes. And I even said, if you don't mind us asking, did he even during his funeral and during that whole period, did you feel resentment towards him, even at his own funeral? I was very careful how I asked these questions, but I asked them nonetheless. And she said yes. She said yes straight away, no hesitation. And it was unusual that she was so open and relaxed to just sharing what would be quite shameful to a lot of people. Like, I've resented my husband at his funeral. I asked her, did you resent him getting adulation? Which is what happens at funerals. Everybody's perfect when they die, aren't they? Never a bad word said at a funeral, which is fine. She couldn't deal with that. Obviously, she couldn't deal with it. Well, that's just what every funeral's like. But yeah, she admitted that she had resentment towards him. Now we understand why she couldn't say his name when we raised the glass. She couldn't say his name. resentful and envious of her dead husband. So at the time I was just taking all this on board. I wasn't really having, I knew it was going to take a while to process it and contemplate it and all the rest of it. But yeah, we kind of shifted our attitude towards how we talk about stepdad in her presence. Shifted our sort of, we became a bit more aware of the sensitivities, and it made us have a bit more respect for St. George, and just, just happy if he treats her well, he treats her well. Let's let them just get on with it. But in hindsight, as things have developed, I don't believe her. I don't believe her story. I'm not saying that she hasn't had an abortion at the age of 37. I'm saying it's a very, very, very one-sided story, and he's not here to defend himself. And the impact of telling me that, the impact was for us to have a little bit less respect for stepdad. And I believe the impact was the desired reason for telling me that in that way and spinning it that way, because I've seen her spin, her version of events so many times. I've witnessed her spin something, omit important information, which would completely change your viewpoint on the story that she's telling you by omitting very, very important little bits of information. She can spin stuff. Why would I think this is going to be any different? I would have to say to myself that she's had a moment, a complete out of character moment, if she's told me the absolute truth. So why would I believe that? Why would I believe that when she's admitted that she resents him? You could see the resentment. She's admitted it, and she's openly admitted that even at his funeral and during that period. She resented him and clearly didn't like the attention he was getting. He's dying, for God's sake. This is so messed up, isn't it? It's so messed up. So, in the moment, I just took it at face value. In hindsight, the Beacon and I have chewed this over, and we're both of the same opinion that it's more than likely been spun, and it's to try and turn us against. She's still in competition. She still resents the fact that me and the Beacon, particularly the Beacon, still have an amazing relationship with him. Yeah, we still have a relationship with somebody who's not here, because it's just in your head, isn't it? It's just, you still think about him, you still go over the memories, and good and bad. Yeah, we still have a relationship. She still has to try and destroy that. That's what she's doing. Now, I said to the Beacon, well, when are you going to tell your sister? Because you kind of keep having these skeletons in the closet, which you need help with. You need help to deal with them. Although this is what I thought at the time. Well, that is still true, but, she's helpless now, in my opinion. But anyway, when are you going to tell your sister? And, the Beacon wasn't 100% sure how she was going to deal with this. Rightly so. I couldn't give her 100%, advice that I was 100% sure on. But I'm setting down, I'm making it clear that, in my opinion, her sister needs to know. the beacon can't carry the burden of this again, having to deal with knowing this. So anyway, the following week, the beacon took her out, took the husk out all day, and took her to some lovely parts of Northumberland. Had a full day with her, and they had a bit of a chat about some of these things. These children that, for one reason or another, aren't here. And this is the beacon trying to do the right thing. And she's decided that she's not going to tell her sister. It's up to the husk to do that, and well, it is. But no, this was, I don't know, let's just say 2 months ago. No, she hasn't told Roadkill. Because, and it's my opinion, because if it was me, you can't tell one of your children that, and not the other. You need, if she hasn't even told either of them, she's told me. So, but obviously she knew I was going to tell Beacon. So anyway, you've got to tell your other child, because if they find out, if Roadkill finds out that her sister's known this for years and years and years and years, and she didn't know, how is that going to make her feel? So anyway, she hasn't told her. And that fact supports my theory that the only reason she told me was to discredit stepdad. How does it support that theory? Because she hasn't told Roadkill. She doesn't need to tell Roadkill, because Roadkill doesn't put him up on a pedestal. Well, we don't, but you know what I mean. In the husk's mind, we do. Roadkill didn't really have that much of a relationship with stepdad. There's nothing wrong with the relationship, but it was nowhere near on a par with the Beacon's relationship with stepdad. She doesn't need to destroy. There's nothing there to destroy. So why would she tell her? Why would she tell her that she, in other words, she's a piece of trash. She thinks of herself as a piece of trash. She goes against her own morals, against her own wants, against the right thing in her mind, just to keep a resource. Why the hell would she tell Roadkill that? When there's no benefit? There's no benefit, because there's nothing to destroy in terms of her relationship with stepdad. So I think I've covered the abortion